Yeah, there's various ways that this. I remember years ago, um, there was like people are like so worried about kids getting kidnapped or whatever.
Right, right. That big, the big scare in the '90s.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that was the whole McMartin preschool thing.
was that what it? Yeah,
Yeah, where all these satanic and sexual things and cats getting sacrificed, all this, and they were all these implanted memories. But that all of a sudden it went out through the media channels, and people were living in that world and were reacting to that hype, to this story. It was like, what world are you living in? You pick your kids up from daycare every day. They're not acting all freaked out and everything. So why are you suddenly treating your kid like you're sending them into Satan's den?
yeah,
Right. And that again comes back to, well, what information ecosystem, what media environment are you living in? Are you aware that that's real to the degree of how that's shaping how you go out into the world?
right. And it's everywhere you look. It's something. Right now, it's these cities are overrun with whatever protesters, and they're just destroying everything, and then
and then you actually turn on the TV and you see people dressed up as chickens and frogs.
yeah, or it's it's like one block, there's just like one protest, or that's maybe a couple blocks, but when they paint it in the media, it's like these cities are under siege, and and this it's one of the benefits, I think, of although I think there's a lot of things that have come about from this technology. The one good thing that at least that applies now, is the fact that people can just post something. They can take their phone out or their camera out, and be like, oh, this is happening right now, and then post it on various social medias. And so now you're starting, there's a different story that's available now, other than like the mainstream media story, which for the longest time was what dominated everything, ever since really, even back with newspapers, and, it's like.
Well, interesting. Like before we started recording today, I was telling you that since the therapeutic disaster almost 2 years ago, and all the pieces of my mental world that got scattered all over the floor, that with the new therapist and all this other stuff, like I've managed to collect all the pieces and put them back into order, right? Or at least I've got a frame built, and it's a lot of it is about these stories that we tell, both the stories that I was told, growing up, and how that influenced my life. And then now, as you and I are talking about, life in the early 21st century here, it's how the environment that we all live in, the one that you grew up in, how you acquired your worldview through growing up with me, through the TV shows that you watch, through the music that you listen to, et cetera, and now how that influences the way that we look at the world today, the way that we interpret the events that are coming to us. At the same time, I hope that what is emerging out of our conversations is the contingent nature of those stories, and how fragile they can be. And I don't mean fragile in the sense of they don't explain anything, but fragile in the sense that you can insert something else into it and change the way that you see the world. And suddenly that certainty that you had, that this is the right thing to do and this is how you should be, isn't quite so sure anymore. And that, I think, tones the temperature down when we're talking to individuals. Even when you and I've argued with each other, when you are convinced that you're right, or when I'm convinced that I'm right, we're not listening.
Most people aren't.